Hello, everybody. Today we have another story of Jesus appearing to his disciples, and in this one, he feeds them. So, this is a couple weeks at least after Jesus has risen from the dead, and he appeared to them in the room where they were with Thomas. And then we heard how they came to know that Jesus is risen for sure because they saw him with their own eyes. Well, now this time what happens is the disciples have gone back to home, and home was in a place called Galilee, which is part of Palestine, where Jesus had lived and where some of the disciples and apostles had lived. And they were fishermen. So they decided one night they would go out fishing. And Peter said, "I'm going out fishing." And six other ones said, "We'll go with you." So they get into their boat and they go out on the Sea of Galilee at night, because night was a better time to catch fish. Now, they didn't fish with a fishing rod and fishing line. They fished with nets. And the nets would be round, and they would have weights on them to hold them down in the water. And the weights would be pretty big, pretty heavy. And so to throw those in the water wasn't easy. But they did it, and they did it all night, and they caught nothing. So it comes to be morning, they have no fish, and they're probably tired, and they're hungry. So anyhow, what happens is daylight is just beginning to appear as they pull their boat in towards the shore, as really probably rowed it in, or maybe they had a sail, but it's coming into shore, and somebody on the coast of the lake says to them, "Children, have you caught anything?" And they respond, "No, nothing." And he says, "Throw your net to the starboard side of the boat." And so they cast their net on that side of the boat, and all of the sudden, their net is filled with fish. So many fish that they had a hard time pulling in the net because now it is so heavy with these fish. But they managed to pull it in. Well, when that happens, St. Peter says, "It is the Lord." And he's so excited that it's Jesus, he jumps out of the boat and runs. Probably he was in water maybe to his waist or up to his knees. He wasn't in real deep water. And he runs to the shore to meet Jesus. And the other disciples bring the boat in with all the fish. And when they get in, what they find is that this guy, who they weren't sure who it was, though Peter knew, he said it's the Lord. They pull their boat in, and then they see and they think, "We aren't sure, but we know this is Jesus." In other words, they say, "We don't recognize him. He doesn't look just like he used to look, but we know it's him because he's appeared to us before." And so Jesus has built a fire. And on it, he had one fish and asked them for more fish. And he cooked them breakfast and gave them breakfast of fish and bread. Does that sound sort of familiar? Fish and bread. Remember, before Jesus died, months or maybe a year before he died, he fed 5,000 people with loaves and fish. And so he's doing it again, not for 5,000, but for those disciples gathered together. And so they're eating their breakfast with him, thrilled to be with him. And then Jesus calls Peter over to him and says, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter says, "Yes, I love you." And Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." And he said to him a second time, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter says, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." And he says, "Feed my sheep." Or he says, "Tend my sheep." And Peter is like, why does he ask twice? And then Jesus said a third time, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter says, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." And Peter was hurt because he remembered that 3 times he had denied that he was a follower of Jesus. Remember on the night before Jesus died, after Jesus had been arrested, and Peter and John went to the place where Jesus was being held. And the people there said, I think he's one of his disciples. I think he's one of his followers. And Peter says, no, I'm not. I don't know the guy. And they said, yeah, you talk like him. And he says, no, I don't know him. And then they say, we're sure you're one of those guys. And Peter says, I don't know him. I don't know him at all. And at that, the rooster crowed. And Peter remembered that Jesus had said to him, Peter, before the cock crows tonight, a cock is a name for a rooster, a cock crows tonight, you will deny me 3 times. So when Jesus asked him 3 times, does he love him? Peter is hurt because he realizes that Jesus is calling him to look at what he had done. But Jesus doesn't call him to look at what he's done because he thinks that Peter needs to suffer. He wants Peter to realize that he has forgiven him and given him special work to do, to feed and to tend the flock. And the flock isn't, in this case, real sheep. It's God's people. And so Jesus is giving Peter a very special job to do. And Peter realizes that and rejoices. But then Jesus says to Peter, Peter, when you were young, you dressed yourself and you went wherever you wanted to go. But now what's happening is that when you're older, there will be people who will take you and they will dress you and bind you and take you where you do not want to go. And Peter realized that Jesus was saying to him that he would suffer for following him. He would pay the price by dying for Jesus. And Peter was willing to do that. And then Peter saw his friend John, another disciple who he was very close to. And he says to Jesus, well, what about him? Will he suffer and die like me? And Jesus said, Peter, that's not for you to worry about. You worry about yourself. What if I want John to live forever until I come in glory at the end of time? And so Peter said, okay, we'll do what you want. Now, people thought that Jesus had said John would live forever. But Jesus didn't say that. He says, what if I want him to? And John did live to an old age, and he died not being martyred, but being imprisoned on an island for following Jesus. This story is a great story for us because it teaches us some things. Number one of the things mentioned in the story that I forgot to mention is they said they caught 153 fish. And so that's interesting. Why would you tell people there were 153 fish? That's an odd number too. Well, at the time that Jesus was walking on earth, they thought that was the number of types or species of fish there were. So that hauling in the net with all those fish represented something much more important. And that is that the apostles would bring faith to all the people on earth. And that would be the work of the church, to bring faith to everyone on earth. The second thing we can remember and take away from this is that Jesus is calling us not to worry so much about what's going to happen to this person or that person, and what do they have to do, and how's that different from what I have to do, and do I have to do more than that person or less than that person, but to just take care of doing what we're called to do, to pray for everyone else, but not to be sticking our nose in their business unless it really is helpful for them. So I think in this time when we're still staying home and everyone's together, we might look and ask ourselves, how am I doing what God wants me to do here at home, and not be worried about, is everyone else doing what they're supposed to be doing, but we take care of making sure we're doing what God calls us to do. And often what God calls us to do is what our moms and dads ask us to do. So you have a good week. I will be back Sunday with another story. God bless you all. Bye.